The forests of North America stretch like living oceans, a tapestry of green and gold swaying under the gentle caress of the wind. Here, sunlight filters through a dense canopy of towering oaks, cedars, and pines, casting scattered diamonds of light on the moss-covered forest floor. Every leaf, every twisted root, every rustling branch tells a story that has existed for thousands of years, long before the arrival of the outside world. Within these living labyrinths, hidden from the prying eyes of distant civilizations, the forest people carved their lives in rhythm with the woods. These were the people who knew the secrets of shadow and light, who listened to the whisper of the wind and the call of the birds as if each sound carried meaning beyond the ordinary. They were not merely survivors. They were stewards of their environment, moving with grace and subtlety through the deep, tangled forests. Their villages were cloaked in nature itself, built where the forest offered concealment and sustenance, often along the gentle curves of hidden rivers or in the quiet hollows where sunlight barely touched the earth. Here, each home, a simple structure of wood, bark, and woven reeds, blended seamlessly into its surroundings. Smoke curled upward from carefully constructed hearths, dissipating into the treetops, revealing the presence of life only to those who truly knew where to look. Life within these villages followed an ancient rhythm, one dictated by the cycles of the forest, the growth of plants, the migrations of animals, and the passage of the seasons. In spring, the forest awakened with the blush of new life. Delicate shoots pushed through rich, dark soil, and the air carried the scent of sap and wildflowers. Children darted through the undergrowth, their laughter light as the wind, while elders moved with deliberate care, tending gardens and preparing for the bounty the year would bring. Summer brought abundance, yet also work. The collection of berries, roots, and medicinal plants, the sharpening of tools, the repair of shelters, and the careful tracking of the creatures that shared their home, but for survival and sacred balance. Each hunt began with observation, patience, and an intimate knowledge of the forest's pulse. They learned to read the footprints left by deer or the subtle disturbances in the underbrush that betrayed a raccoon's journey, and yet hunting was not only about sustenance, it was a lesson in respect. The hunters carried rituals in their hearts, silent prayers to the spirits of the forest, for taking a life demanded acknowledgement of the life that had been given. Nothing went to waste. Every part of the animal was used. Skins became clothing or shelter, bones transformed into tools or ornaments, sinew braided into ropes, and the meat sustained bodies through long winters. These hidden villages were not isolated, but intricately connected, woven into a network of trails and knowledge that spanned vast forests. When the forest people travelled, they left markers in the soil, on stones, or carved subtly into tree bark, guiding kin and allies while remaining invisible to strangers. Rivers were highways, their currents carrying canoes silently downstream, connecting villages through trade and stories. Pottery, woven baskets, and crafted ornaments moved along these waterways, each item carrying a message, a symbol of identity, or a token of goodwill. As autumn arrived, the forests shifted into a symphony of amber, crimson, and gold. The forest people prepared for the coming cold, storing food in hidden caches, repairing shelters, and making warm garments from the hides of hunted animals. The air turned crisp, carrying the musky scent of decaying leaves, the distant call of migrating birds, and the quiet, patient movements of creatures preparing for winter. Nights grew longer, and the villages glowed softly with the warmth of hearth fires. Families gathered, sharing stories not written on paper, but etched into memory. Legends of the trees, the animals, the spirits that watched over them, and the ancestors whose wisdom had guided generations. Through it all, the forests remained alive. Sunlight shifted and shimmered, winds carried secrets from one tree to another, and the ground beneath was a quilt of living matter, nurturing new growth even as it decomposed the old. The forest people moved through this world with grace, leaving minimal trace, living in harmony with a complex web of life that stretched beyond their perception. Every step was deliberate, every gesture mindful, every act a silent prayer of gratitude to the forest that both sheltered and sustained them. In this first part of their story, the forest people emerged not merely as villagers or hunters, but as a civilization of the wild, intimate, observant, and profound in their understanding of life hidden beneath the canopy. Their world, though invisible to the outside, pulses with energy, wisdom, and beauty, a delicate balance maintained through patience, knowledge, and respect. And it is in these quiet, hidden moments, beneath the watchful eyes of ancient trees and the distant stars, that we begin to understand the true depth of life among the forests of Native America. Dawn in the hidden villages arrived quietly, almost imperceptibly, with shafts of golden light piercing the dense foliage. The forest seemed to breathe in unison with its inhabitants. Birds stirred, insects hummed, and the soft rustle of leaves signaled a new day's awakening. Within the villages, the forest people moved with practiced ease, their lives attuned to the rhythm of the woods. Each motion was purposeful, yet unhurried, a reflection of a culture that revered patience, observation, and harmony. The day began with tending to the essentials of survival. Elders roused from their slumber near the warm glow of hearth fires, stepping lightly on the damp forest floor. They checked traps set the previous night, inspected food stores, and prepared herbal remedies collected from the forest's depths. Children followed, learning the careful ways of gathering edible roots, berries, and nuts, their small hands brushing against ferns and moss as they mimicked the movements of those who had walked these trails for generations. Lessons were never hurried. Every leaf and stone held knowledge. Every rustle of wind or chirp of a bird was a clue, a story, a guide to the life that thrived unseen beneath the canopy. The forest people were master craftsmen, skilled in transforming the resources of the woods into tools, clothing, and art. They carved wooden implements with precision, braided reeds into strong baskets, and shaped clay into durable vessels for storing water, grains, and preserved meats. Every object was crafted with care, reflecting a deep respect for the materials themselves. Nothing was wasted, and beauty was found in the simplicity of function. Even the smallest tool carried the mark of its maker's understanding and devotion, a silent testament to the intimate connection between human life and the living forest. Hunting and gathering were not merely tasks, they were sacred acts, interwoven with ritual and mindfulness. Before setting out, hunters performed quiet ceremonies, offering thanks to the spirits of the forest for the life they were about to take. They moved through the undergrowth, with the lightest steps, observing tracks, scents, and subtle disturbances in the vegetation. Deer, rabbits, and other forest creatures were approached with reverence. Every movement was calculated, every arrow or spear launched with intention and respect. When a hunt was successful, the entire community partook in the careful processing of the animal, ensuring that nothing went to waste. The bones, sinews, and hides became tools, clothing, and shelter, while the meat nourished the bodies of the villagers, sustaining them through days of labor and nights of contemplation. Yet the life of the forest people extended far beyond survival. Music, storytelling, and ceremony were woven into every day, breathing vitality and cohesion into the community. Flutes crafted from hollow reeds sang melodies that mimicked the calls of birds, while drums made of stretched hides echoed the heartbeat of the earth itself. Stories were recited beneath the canopy, recounting the deeds of ancestors, the mysteries of the forest, and the lessons of animals that had shaped the lives of generations. These tales were not merely entertainment, they were instruction, philosophy, and memory, binding the community to its past and guiding its future. As seasons shifted, so too did the activities of the villagers. Summer brought the gathering of medicinal herbs and the careful tending of gardens hidden in small clearings. Autumn demanded the storage of food and preparation for the harsh months ahead. Winter cloaked the forest in snow and silence, testing resilience and ingenuity. Fires burned bright, offering warmth and light as families wove mats, repaired shelters, and shared the wisdom of elders. In the longest nights, they gazed at the stars through breaks in the canopy, reading the constellations and imagining the paths of their ancestors across the sky. Every celestial movement was a guide, every star a reminder of their place within a vast and interconnected universe. Spirituality permeated every aspect of life in these hidden villages. The forest people believed that every element of their environment, trees, streams, stones, animals, and wind, possessed a spirit. They approached the forest not as conquerors, but as participants in a sacred relationship. Offerings of food, feathers, or crafted charms were left at sacred trees or near streams, gestures of gratitude and acknowledgement. Dreams were considered messages, and visions glimpsed in the quiet hours of dawn or under the glow of the moon were treated as guidance. In this way, life and spirit were inseparable. Every action, every thought, and every observation contributed to a living, breathing web of existence. Trade and communication between villages reinforced these bonds, yet they were subtle and deliberate. Small pathways, hidden by foliage, connected distant settlements, while waterways carried canoes laden with crafted goods, food, and tokens of identity. A finely woven basket or carved pendant could tell a story across miles of forest, connecting people who might never meet but shared in a common understanding of their world. By dusk, the forest was transformed once again. Shadows stretched, the air grew cooler, and the songs of diurnal creatures were replaced by the calls of nocturnal life. Villagers gathered around fires, their faces glowing in the flickering light, sharing silent appreciation for the day's work and the protection of the forest. The forest people lived in quiet balance, aware that their existence was sustained by attentiveness, respect, and knowledge passed down through countless generations. Each day closed with gratitude, each night opened a portal to dreams that whispered secrets of the trees, rivers, and stars. In this intricate, silent, and sacred dance, the hidden villagers thrived. Life among the forest people was never hurried, never wasteful, and never disconnected. It was a life of observation, of listening, of moving with intention, and of honoring the unseen spirits that governed the woods. In the quiet rustle of leaves, the shimmer of light on moss, and the distant cry of an owl, the heart of these communities beat steadily, unseen by the outside world, yet vibrant, enduring, and profoundly alive. As the sun climbed and dipped in its eternal path, the forests held more than life. They held mysteries. To the forest people, the woods were not merely a home or a resource. They were a living archive of memory, spirit, and power. Hidden among the dense trees, mossy stones, and winding streams were sacred sites, places imbued with meaning, shaped by the footsteps, offerings, and ceremonies of countless generations. Some were marked by ancient trees, whose trunks twisted skyward in impossible spirals, others by stone formations that jutted from the earth as if raised by unseen hands. Every site carried stories, invisible threads of connection that link the village, the forest, and the unseen world of spirits. Rituals were central to the rhythm of life, acting as bridges between the mundane and the sacred. The forest people recognized that each season, each animal migration, each shift in the wind held significance, and their ceremonies honored these subtle signs. In spring, they celebrated renewal, marking the thaw of streams, the first shoots of edible plants, and the return of migratory birds. Fires were lit in small clearings, circles of stones forming the boundaries of sacred space. Participants moved deliberately, their chants soft, almost merging with the rustling leaves, their movements mimicking the growth and flow of the natural world around them. Offerings were left: feathers, seeds, crafted trinkets, tokens of gratitude for the continued abundance of the forest. Rites of passage held profound importance. Young members of the community were guided through ceremonies that signified the transition from child to adult. Each act of initiation intertwined with the forest itself. A young hunter might be led silently to a hidden grove at dawn, observing and listening to the birds, learning to read the signs of the deer tracks in the soft soil, and understanding the sacred responsibility that came with taking life. A young gatherer might spend days alone near a stream, discovering edible plants and medicinal herbs, and reflecting on the connection between nourishment and respect for the natural world. In these moments, solitude was not punishment, but enlightenment, an immersion into the living teachings of the forest. The spiritual framework of the forest people extended beyond human life. They believed that animals, plants, rivers, stones, and even the wind carried intention and spirit. Hunters left careful offerings after a kill, whispering thanks for the life that would sustain their community. Gatherers offered a small portion of their harvest to the forest, an acknowledgement that even the smallest act of taking required balance. Every ceremony, every ritual, every silent moment in the forest reinforced a truth central to their worldview, that all life was intertwined and every action had consequences across a web far larger than themselves. Hidden within the forest were sites of greater mystery. Some trees were hollowed naturally, forming tunnels into the earth, where small altars of stone, bone, or clay rested, holding charms and tokens of protection. Certain streams were believed to carry messages from ancestors, their waters reflecting visions when observed under the light of dawn or moon. Seasonal changes were closely observed. When a particular flower bloomed or a specific bird called, it signaled times for planting, hunting, or gathering. This meticulous observation formed a calendar of survival and ceremony, a deep and precise knowledge of the rhythms of the natural world that outsiders could rarely comprehend. At night, the forest transformed into a realm of quiet illumination. The canopy muted the world above, leaving only shafts of moonlight to pierce the darkness, highlighting the silver of a flowing stream or the glimmer of dew on a leaf. The forest people often gathered in small circles for night ceremonies, softly drumming or singing, creating vibrations that seemed to resonate with the very heartbeat of the forest. These moments were not for display. They were personal, spiritual, and communal, a reaffirmation of life's delicate balance, and a means of connecting with ancestors and unseen forces. The seasonal cycles dictated much of the hidden village's activities. Spring encouraged growth and renewal. Summer demanded labor and vigilance. Autumn brought preservation and preparation. Winter imposed introspection and survival. Each cycle had its own rituals, its own quiet celebrations, and its own set of stories. Children learned these through participation and observation, gradually absorbing an understanding of the forest's mysteries that words alone could never convey. They learned that patience was wisdom, observation was knowledge, and respect was survival. Even within this seeming stillness, the forest was alive with subtle drama. Deer paused in the mist, birds watched silently from hidden perches, and insects orchestrated a symphony that could be felt as much as heard. The forest people existed in constant dialogue with these forces, moving almost invisibly through their world, interpreting signs, responding to rhythms, and ensuring that every action was measured and deliberate. In these hidden villages, life and spirit were inseparable. The forest people existed not just in the forest, but as part of it. Their daily routines, rituals, and secret knowledge blending seamlessly with the natural world. Each tree, stream, and stone was a teacher, every season a guide, and every quiet moment a reminder of their profound connection to the unseen forces that governed existence. It was in these sacred, quiet, and hidden spaces that the true essence of the forest people became visible, not through sight, but through understanding. Their civilization thrived not in monuments of stone or written words, but in the ongoing living practice of harmony, observation, and reverence for the world that sheltered them. And as the moon traced its path across the night sky, casting silver light through the trees, the hidden villages remained alive, vigilant, and eternally intertwined with the mysteries of the forest. Beneath the dense canopy, where sunlight filtered in gentle moving patterns, the hidden villages of the forest people were not isolated islands, but points in an intricate network of life, knowledge, and exchange. Though these communities were careful to remain concealed from outsiders, they were deeply connected to one another through trails, rivers, and silent understandings. Paths carved into the earth, hidden beneath moss and leaves, guided travelers from one village to the next, their markings subtle, an arrangement of stones, a notched branch, the placement of a feather, visible only to those who knew the language of the forest. Trade was an essential component of this network, not motivated by wealth or ambition, but by necessity, knowledge, and shared survival. Villagers exchanged food preserved for the seasons, woven baskets, crafted tools, and medicinal herbs collected from distant corners of the forest. Each transaction carried meaning, serving as both sustenance and communication, a way of maintaining relationships without drawing attention to the settlements themselves. The objects that travelled these hidden paths were more than commodities. They were vessels of culture carrying stories, symbols, and the silent language of connection between communities. Beyond material exchange, trade was also a conduit for knowledge. Hunters shared insights about the movement of animals. Gatherers exchanged methods for identifying rare roots and herbs. Artisans passed along techniques for weaving, carving, or firing clay. These exchanges were subtle but profound, strengthening the resilience of each village and deepening their understanding of the forest's complex ecosystem. Through this network, communities remained self-sufficient yet never truly isolated, learning from one another while preserving the secrecy that kept their villages safe. Interwoven with trade were alliances and subtle politics, often unspoken but ever present. Each village maintained its own leadership and system of decision-making, guided by elders whose experience commanded respect. Yet these leaders also negotiated relationships with neighbouring settlements, balancing cooperation with caution. Disputes over hunting grounds, water sources, or seasonal caches were addressed with careful diplomacy. Elders met along riverbanks or in hidden clearings, their conversations measured and deliberate, designed to preserve harmony without revealing vulnerabilities. Even silence in this world of keen observation spoke volumes. A pause, a gesture, a particular placement of an offering could communicate agreement, warning, or intent. Ceremonies sometimes reinforced these alliances. Seasonal gatherings at neutral locations offered opportunities to share stories, perform rituals, and reaffirm shared values. During these gatherings, music filled the air, soft flutes imitating bird calls, rhythmic drumming echoing through the trees, and chants that carried ancestral wisdom across the forest. Yet these moments of connection were always conducted with caution and respect. Boundaries were maintained, ensuring that each village remained distinct while participating in the broader network of survival and knowledge. The forest itself played a central role in maintaining this delicate balance. Its density, its ever-changing patterns, and the subtle cues it provided allowed villagers to remain hidden while facilitating movement between them. Travelers relied on natural landmarks, the shape of a gnarled tree, the flow of a stream, the arrangement of stones along a ridge. Each village left minimal trace, moving in ways that respected the forest and ensured sustainability. In return, the forest provided concealment, resources, and guidance, acting as both protector and teacher. Even the animals of the forest were part of this intricate web. Hunters and trackers observed the habits of deer, bear, and smaller game, using these movements to plan expeditions, avoid depletion, and maintain balance. Birds acted as sentinels, their calls signaling the approach of strangers or the movement of weather. Streams carried life-giving water and fish, but also warnings in the subtle changes of current and scent. In every interaction, the forest people demonstrated a profound awareness of interconnectedness, a silent diplomacy that honored both human and non-human neighbors alike. Night brought another layer of subtle communication. Fires in distant clearings, could signal approach or intention, while smoke patterns conveyed messages that were understood by trained eyes. Even the rhythm of nocturnal drumming, performed during ceremonies or watches, carried meaning, echoing through the dense trees to inform and reassure neighbouring villages. The forest itself amplified these signals, turning ordinary sounds into instruments of coordination, warning, and alliance. Through trade, ritual, and silent diplomacy, the hidden villages maintained a balance that allowed them to thrive for generations. Their success depended not on dominance, but on observation, respect, and the careful management of relationships, both human and natural. Each village existed as part of a living, breathing network, its survival dependent on harmony, knowledge, and the wisdom of elders who understood the subtle politics written in the wind, the trees, and the flowing streams. In this quiet, intricate world, the forest people demonstrated a form of civilization unlike any built of stone or iron. Their power lay in patience, perception, and connection. Every step taken in the forest, every offering left at a sacred site, every exchange along hidden trails reinforced a truth that outsiders rarely glimpsed. Survival was inseparable from balance, and harmony was inseparable from understanding. As the stars rose above the canopy and the moon painted silver light upon the leaves, the villagers slumbered, alive in the quiet vigilance of the forest. Paths remained hidden, knowledge passed silently from elder to child, and the intricate web of connections stretched unseen, yet unbroken. It was in this delicate, deliberate, and deeply respectful way that the hidden villages of the forest people endured, their civilization thriving in the shadows, in the rhythms of the forest, and in the subtle politics of life, lived quietly but profoundly beneath the trees. Hidden dangers and the art of survival. The forest was a world of shifting rhythms, its seasons not mere divisions of time, but living forces that shaped every movement, every choice, and every breath taken by the hidden villagers within. To the forest people, survival was not a constant struggle, but a quiet conversation with the cycles of nature, a conversation conducted through observation, respect, and unwavering patience. Spring, the breath of renewal. Spring arrived not with sudden warmth, but with subtle signs. Thin layers of frost melted slowly into the dark soil. Buds swelled on branches, sap rose silently through tree trunks, and streams freed themselves from ice with gentle murmurs. This season was one of preparation, discovery, and beginnings. The forest people walked with soft steps along thawing trails, gathering young shoots and early herbs, renewing caches hidden beneath moss and stone. Gardens carved into quiet clearings were revitalized, seeds saved from the previous year pressed carefully into moist earth. Animals emerged from winter's silence. Deer grazed on tender shoots, bears stirred within their dens, and birds returned with songs that filled the canopy. Life pulsed again, and with it came rituals of thanks. Offerings were placed beside tree roots and along riverbanks. Fragments of woven grass, dried berries, or carved symbols acknowledging the forest's generosity. But spring also demanded vigilance, for melting snow could swell rivers beyond their banks, and the ground remained treacherous from cold and decay. Summer, the season of abundance and labour. Summer was a season of plenty, yet it was also the most demanding. Heat settled between the trees, turning leaves into whispering layers of green. The air shimmered with insects, and the forest floor, dense with ferns, mushrooms, and flowering plants, offered food and medicine in abundance. The forest people rose with the first light, tending cultivated patches of corn, squash, beans, and native grains grown in sunlit clearings. Hunters moved along ancient trails, tracking deer through tall grass and listening for the soft crackle of twigs beneath hooves. Gatherers ventured deeper into the woods, collecting berries, roots, bark, and plants, always careful not to take more than the forest could spare. Summer was also the time of preservation. Lean-to structures were erected near the edges of villages, where meat was smoked and fish dried over slow-burning fires. Berries were crushed into pastes, spread onto bark, and left to dry in the sun. Seeds were sorted and stored in clay vessels, each marked with patterns to denote their origin and purpose. Labour was steady and deliberate, for the forest people knew that abundance was temporary, and what summer gave, winter would demand. Autumn, the quiet, before the cold. Autumn brought a soft unravelling of the forest's green cloak. Leaves turned gold, amber, and crimson, drifting like silent embers to the forest floor. The air tasted of wood smoke and ripe fruit. Animals moved with urgency, building their last stores, leaving prints in the damp earth. Migrating birds filled the skies in shifting formations, their calls echoing across rivers and hills. For the hidden villages, autumn was a time of gathering, storing, and reflection. Food supplies were checked and expanded, nuts gathered in woven baskets, herbs tied in bundles and hung inside shelters to dry, medicines ground and preserved in small, carved containers. Hunters travelled farther, following trails worn thin by generations, their eyes sharp for signs of deer, elk, or migrating flocks. Canoes glided along rivers burdened with goods, clay vessels, woven blankets, preserved fish, bound for neighbouring villages. These journeys were quiet, the paddles stirring only small ripples, the forest watching silently. With each exchange, alliances were reaffirmed and preparation shared. Winter, the trial of silence and endurance. Winter descended without haste, cloaking the forest in white silence. Snow piled against lodge walls, weighed down the branches and muffled every sound. Rivers slowed into glassy sheets, and the breath of the forest seemed to fade beneath the cold. Within the villages, life shifted inward. Fires crackled in central hearths, warm light flickering over wooden beams and woven mats. Families remained close, wrapped in furs, repairing tools, mending clothes, and shaping new arrows or fishing hooks. The smoke rising through lodge roofs curled into the cold air, vanishing before it reached the treetops. Winter tested every lesson learned throughout the year. Food was rationed with careful discipline. Dried berries and smoked meat were shared, every piece measured in silence. Snow was melted for water, and tracks outside were studied for signs of intruding animals or desperate prey. The cold crept into bones, but never alone. Stories, songs, and memory kept the heart of the village warm. Hidden dangers of the forest. Beneath the beauty and balance of the forest lay dangers both seen and unseen. Sudden storms could snap ancient trees, sending branches crashing onto trails and shelters. Rivers in spring could swell with destructive force, sweeping away storage pits or carved canoes. Venomous insects and plants lay hidden among ferns, their sting or poison known only to those taught to recognize them. Predators, wolves, cougars, bears, moved like shadows, neither friend nor foe, but reminders of the forest's law. And beneath the surface of daily life lurked hunger, sickness, and injury. A missed harvest, a failed hunt, an early frost could ripple through villages like a silent wave. Survival relied on preparation, cooperation, and wisdom passed down, not through books, but through breath and memory. The art of survival, the strength of the forest people, lay not in conquest, but in adaptation. Their survival strategies were subtle as moss on stone and enduring as the trees themselves. They built homes with low profiles, blending into earth and wood so seamlessly that even from a short distance they appeared as part of the land. Storage pits were hidden beneath layers of bark and leaf, protected from animals and masked from wandering eyes. Trails were chosen not for speed, but for concealment, winding with the landscape rather than cutting through it. They knew which herbs could heal fever, which mushrooms nourished or harmed, and how to read the sky before rain or snow arrived. They understood silence as deeply as sound and movement as deeply as stillness. In their world, survival was not a battle, but a lifelong listening, listening to wind, water, animal, and earth. And somewhere in that silent darkness, a lone scout rode back into camp. Frost clung to his braids, and his horse's flanks steamed with cold sweat. He didn't need to speak. The way he stood straight in the saddle, the way every hunter rose to their feet, told the story well enough. They were coming. Far out on the horizon, black shapes moved like storm clouds across the land. Slow, powerful, ancient. The buffalo had returned to the plains. Before dawn even touched the edge of the sky, the camp was already awake. The fires glowed quietly inside the lodges, their light flickering against stretched hides. No one spoke loudly. Voices remained soft, like breath on glass, careful not to disturb the stillness that lay across the sleeping earth. Outside, the grass was silvered with frost, and the air tasted of iron and distant snow. One by one, the hunters gathered at the edge of the camp. Their faces were calm, though their hearts beat with the quiet thunder of purpose. Each man carried with him not only his weapons, bow, lance, knife, but also the weight of his people's trust. Feathers braided into their hair stirred gently in the cold breeze. Their horses stood ready, muscles tense beneath their hides, breath drifting into the darkness like pale smoke. No words were needed. The elder hunter stepped forward, wearing the talisman blessed by the old woman days before. Around his shoulders was a robe of white wolf fur, symbol of silence, of patience, of the watcher in the snow. His eyes moved over the young hunters, some restless, shifting their weight, others steady, faces unreadable as stone. He raised his hand and the camp seemed to exhale. A low chant began, not sung for ears, but spoken for the land, for the spirits. It was not loud. It did not need to be. It flowed like wind through tall grass, rising and falling in rhythm with the heartbeat of the earth. The words carried prayers older than memory, calling for swiftness, for courage, for mercy, calling for balance, because the hunt was not conquest. It was an agreement, a life given, a life sustained. Then, as the first faint glow of morning touched the sky, they rode. The horses moved as one, shadows crossing a shadowed land. The grass parted beneath them, whispering against their legs. The cold air stung their faces, but they did not flinch. No laughter, no boast, only the rhythm of hooves, the creak of leather, and the distant promise of thunder. By the time the sun rose fully, they had reached the ridge, and there, spread across the valley below, moved the great herd, thousands of dark bodies shifting like storm clouds across the earth. Their breath rose in misty columns. Their hooves drummed against the frozen ground in slow, steady waves. The sound was not loud yet, but it trembled in the bones, the warning before thunder. The hunters gazed in silence. To some of the younger ones, it looked like the beating heart of the world laid bare before them. Vast, alive, unbroken, the elder hunter dismounted, knelt in the cold grass, and pressed his palm to the earth. He spoke not to the sky, but to the soil beneath his hand. "We come not to take, but to honor." The buffalo moved closer to the river below, unaware. The hunters prepared. Bows were tightened, spears were lifted, horses pawed the ground, eager and unsure. Breath hung in the air like smoke from a silent fire. Then, without drum, without shout, the signal was given. A single hawk cry, sharp and falling from the sky. The riders surged forward, hooves struck the earth in unison. The world exploded into sound, thunder beneath them, wind against their faces, the roar of the awakening herd. The buffalo scattered, their massive forms pounding across the plain like living storm clouds. The hunters wove between them with grace and danger intertwined, bows drawn, lances poised. For a heartbeat, the world was only motion, earth, muscle, breath. And in that moment, the hunter and the hunted moved as one. The earth trembled. Dust began to rise in great rolling clouds from the plain as the hunt swept across it, turning the quiet morning into a storm of life, breath, and power. The sun, not yet high in the sky, cast long shadows beneath the buffalo, making them seem like moving mountains. Dark, thundering, unstoppable, windswept grasses bent beneath their charge, rippling like water beneath a tempest. The hunters merged with the land, bodies low against their horses, eyes fixed with calm precision. Their breaths came slow, controlled, while all around them the world raged with motion. Each rider followed the ancient teachings of his people. Do not chase the strongest. Do not strike in anger. Do not waste the life you are given. To take a buffalo was to step into the oldest circle. Life for life, honor for survival. Arrows flew silently through the air, glinting briefly in sunlight before vanishing into the hides of chosen animals. The impact was swift, mercy given in an instant. Each hunter knew exactly where to aim, not to cause pain, but to bring swift stillness. A buffalo stumbled, then fell, the earth shaking softly under its final breath. And yet the hunt did not stop. The plains stretched endlessly beneath a sky of pale blue, but the space between breath and death felt sacred. For some riders, those young, riding in their first true hunt, the world had become a blur of pounding hooves and rushing blood. Their hearts beat as if trying to match the rhythm of the herd. Fear and exhilaration wove together, threatening to break their focus. But the wind carried the teachings of their elders, whispering across the grass. Hold your breath until your soul settles. Let your hands move like water, not fire. Life is not taken in fury, it is received in gratitude. They steadied. Horses leapt over small ravines, hooves striking rocks that sent sparks into the cold morning air. Spears followed, their wooden shafts gleaming with ochre paint. the symbols of storms, rivers, and roots. Some hunters rode close beside the buffalo, so near they could feel the warmth rising off their thick coats, could smell the musk of grass and earth tangled in their fur. One hunter, older than most, bent low and touched his horse's neck, whispering breath instead of words. The animal understood. It surged forward with strength, held in quiet reserve, matching the pace of a massive bull buffalo who ran slightly apart from the herd. Its dark eyes were old, its horns weathered by storms and winters. The hunter knew this one would not run much longer. This was a life ready to return to the earth. He lifted his spear, not hurried, not hesitant. He struck. The bull faltered, slowed, then lowered itself onto the grass with dignity, as though lying down to rest in its final winter. The hunter dismounted and placed his hand on its great head. The bull's breath came slow, then still. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of spirit, of memory, of ancient understanding. Around him, the hunt still thundered, but for a moment, time stopped. Elsewhere on the plain, another hunter guided his horse with skill so precise it seemed unreal. He weaved through the herd, avoiding locked horns and flaring nostrils. The ground beneath was becoming slick with churned grass and frost, and the horse's flanks shone with a thin sheen of sweat despite the cold. Their breaths rose in clouds like mist from river water at dawn. Some buffalo, realizing the danger, changed direction all at once. It was like a black wave turning. The ground quaked as hundreds shifted course, and for a heartbeat, it seemed the hunters would be swallowed by the tide of bodies. But they trusted the land. They trusted their horses. With effortless grace, they veered to the side, narrowly avoiding the surge. The dust gathered in thick curtains. Far off, the women, children, and elders watched from the high ridge, wrapped in robes of fur and woven cloth. They did not call out. They stood in respectful silence. Smoke curls rose from the small fires kept alive for prayers. They held willow branches and sage leaves, not weapons. Their task was not to take life, but to guide spirits gently onward. They watched the plains transform into a living painting. Horses gliding like spirits between towering beasts, dust glowing gold in the newborn sunlight, shadows of eagles circling high above. By the time the sun reached its middle place in the sky, the thunder began to slow. The herd stretched farther now, breaking into scattered groups. Some had crossed the icy river and vanished toward distant hills. Others lingered, wary, watching their fallen kin upon the ground. The hunters too slowed. No one chased beyond what was needed. No one took more than their people could honor and use. Slowly, the storm of hooves faded into a calm wind. Silence returned to the plains. Not empty silence, but deep, breathing silence. The kind that follows prayer. The plains had grown quiet. The dust that had risen like smoke now drifted slowly back to the earth, settling over trampled grass and the dark shapes lying across the land. The wind, which had carried the roar of hooves and the pulse of life, softened into a low whisper, as though speaking only to the earth itself. The sun hung higher now, pale gold against a wide sky, its light solemn rather than triumphant. The hunt had ended. Across the field, horses stood with lowered heads, sides heaving gently from their effort. Their coats, damp with sweat, glistened faintly beneath the sun. The hunters moved among the fallen buffalo, not with haste or triumph, but with reverence. No laughter rose, no careless shouts. Only quiet footsteps, the brush of leather against grass, the slow exhale of wind through feathers tied in hair and mane. Each hunter approached the buffalo he had taken, stepping lightly as one walks upon sacred ground. He knelt beside the great body, still warm from life, and placed his palm upon its brow. The earth beneath felt steady, ancient, holding the weight of thousands of such moments, remembered in stone and soil. No words were spoken aloud. The language used here did not need the tongue. It lived in the steady breath drawn into the chest, in the bowing of the head, in the soft press of a hand to fur still damp with morning frost. A silent promise passed from human to animal, from hunter to hunted. Your life will not be wasted. You will rise again in the breath of our people, in the fire of our lodges, in the footsteps of our children. The women who had watched from the ridge now descended quietly, their robes stirring gently against their ankles. They carried knives of sharpened bone, bundles of sage, and small pouches of red earth. Children followed, their eyes wide, not with fear, but with understanding born of many seasons. This was not a scene of death. This was a place of giving. The first fire was lit. Not large, not roaring, just a small, steady flame, protected by a ring of stones and prayerful hands. Thin trails of smoke drifted upward. Sage was placed into the flames, and the air filled with its soothing, sacred scent. It wound around the bodies of the buffalo, around the hunters and the horses, around the tall, quiet grass. It lifted to the sky, carrying gratitude. Far to the west, the river glimmered, cold, winding through the land like a silver thread. Its quiet murmur seemed to echo the rituals taking place. Water and smoke, earth and flesh, wind and memory, all elements stood present. The hunters began their work. Blades, honed across whetstone and memory, cut through thick hide. They worked with careful hands, guided by knowledge passed through generations. Where to cut so the skin would come away clean, how to remove sinew for bowstrings, how to gather the warm heart and liver first to offer to the elderly, the pregnant, the ill. The women worked beside them, placing sage and sweet grass near each animal's head, touching the earth with red ochre as a mark of thanks. The children gathered dry branches for the fire, moving with silent purpose. No task was too small to be sacred. Slowly the land transformed. What had been a battlefield of motion now became a place of preparation, of quiet industry. Skins were laid out upon the grass. Meat was cut into long strips to be dried later under the sun and smoke. Bones were gathered, some for tools, some for needles and flutes, some to be buried as gifts to the soil. Nothing was wasted, not bone, not blood, not breath. Above them, the sky shifted. Clouds pulled thin like strands of wool across the blue, and the sun leaned westward. Its light turned softer, warmer. Shadows lengthened. Somewhere beyond the horizon, wolves watched with patient eyes, waiting not to steal, but to take only what was left for them by tradition. When the last of the buffalo was honored, when the hides were cleaned and the blood had ceased to steam against the cold air, a great stillness settled once more. The hunters stood together, hands stained with earth and life. The wind picked up again, carrying with it the faint rattle of dried gourds hanging from saddles, the creak of leather, the hush of prayer. And as the sun touched the rim of the world, the first stars rose like embers caught in the breath of the sky. Night approached, but it was not a night of sorrow. It was a night of gratitude. The fires would burn until dawn, and the stories, told without voices, would rise in smoke and drift among the stars. The light of day faded slowly, like a breath being drawn back into the sky. The western horizon blushed with the last orange warmth of the sun, while the plains turned a soft grey blue beneath gathering shadows. The air cooled gently, carrying the scents of sage smoke, fresh meat, trampled grass, and the distant sweetness of pine from forests far beyond sight. One by one, fires were kindled across the camp, small circles of warmth against the vastness of night. These fires did not roar, they breathed. Their flames licked gently at the dry wood, embers glowing like fragments of fallen stars. Around them, the people gathered, not in celebration, but in reverence. There were no loud voices, no songs of victory. Only the soft sound of crackling firewood, the hoot of an owl in the distance, the slow heartbeat of a land at peace after thunder. The buffalo meat, freshly cut, was placed on wooden racks near the fires to begin smoking. Thin strips hung like dark ribbons, glistening with the oils of life. Fat crackled softly in clay pots, suspended above coals, sending up a faint aroma that wound through the camp. Elders were served first, the very young and the expecting mothers next. This order was ancient, written not on paper, but in blood, breath, and memory. Children sat near the fires with quiet eyes. Their small faces glowed orange in the firelight, reflecting sparks that drifted upward into the night. They watched as their mothers stirred soups made from marrow and roots, as their fathers cleaned weapons and wiped them carefully with leather and snowmelt. They watched the hunters, still silent, still calm, move among the fires with purpose. No child asked why the buffalo gave their lives. They had always known. As the sky deepened into velvet black, the stars appeared. First a handful, then hundreds, then thousands. They stretched from one horizon to another, like grains of white sand thrown across the darkness. The Milky Way wound overhead like a silver river, the path of spirits, where the souls of buffalo and men walked together toward the lodge of the ancestors. The first smoke offering of night was made. A handful of herbs, sage, sweetgrass, cedar, was placed into the fire. White smoke rose in a twisting column, neither hurried nor slow. It climbed into the sky carrying gratitude. Gratitude for the buffalo, for the endurance of the horses, for the strength of the hunters, for the quiet patience of the women who waited and prayed. Nothing was said aloud, yet everyone knew the words carried inside the smoke. Beyond the light of the fires, the land rested. Where the buffalo had fallen, the grass lay flat, marked by hoof and blood. Coyotes paced in the shadows, but they did not draw near. Ravens perched upon distant rocks, waiting for morning. The land, fed by life given, drank in the quiet of night like cool water. Within the camp, the first quiet meal began. Clay bowls were passed from hand to hand, filled with meat and steaming broth. No one feasted greedily. They ate slowly, tasting not only the food, but the journey, the frost of morning, the thunder of hooves, the stillness that followed. Every bite was a memory, every swallow a prayer, and with full hearts and warm bodies, the people settled into deeper stillness. Some sat with eyes closed, listening to the fire. Some watched the stars in silence. Some smooth blankets made of buffalo hide across sleeping children. Behind the lodges, The skins of the buffalo hung like dark sails, waiting to be cleaned further in the morning light. Only the voices of the night animals spoke. An owl called across the distant trees. A wolf sang far beyond the hills. The wind brushed the grass like a mother's hand upon a sleeping child. Time moved gently, and as the fires burned lower, sending only embers into the darkening sky, the elders began their silent telling, not through words spoken into the night air, but through memories whispered to the heart. Stories of the first hunt, stories of the buffalo who walked upright as men, stories of the time the stars came down as fireflies and taught the people how to shape flint. These stories did not require mouths to speak them. The fire told them in its hissing. The stars told them in their shimmering. The earth told them in its warmth beneath the soles of tired feet. And when the moon rose, pale, round, watching, the entire camp seemed to breathe as one. Above them, the sky held 1,000 lifetimes. Below them, the earth held 1,000 bones. And between the two, they lived, quiet, grateful, unafraid, preparing what the land has given. The buffalo lay where they had fallen, but already their bodies had been touched by many hands. The work of butchering continued as the sun rose. Cold hands, sometimes numbed by frost, continued to cut, scrape, and wrap. There was no waste. Flesh was sliced into long strips, some to be eaten fresh, others to be hung from wooden poles for drying when the camp returned home. Bones were separated for tools, tendons stretched for bowstrings or thread. Skulls, heavy and sacred, were cleaned and set aside to be carried, but not by horses. They would be carried by hand, because the weight of responsibility should not be shifted to another creature. Some of the women stood quietly beside the chosen animals, shaking crushed sage or tobacco onto the earth before the final cuts. The hunters continued to work, but always with intention. Thick hides were peeled back, heavy with frost, and folded for transport. The best sinews were taken. The soft organs were packed into stomachs or bladders for preservation. By mid-morning, the area no longer looked like the aftermath of a hunt. It looked like the beginning of travel. The practical morning after the hunt, the sun had not yet risen above the horizon, but the sky had begun to pale, soft silver washed with blue. The camp had already started to awaken. The warmth of the night's fires no longer burned, only faint smoke and cold ash remained. The smell of sage, dried grass, animal fat, and smoke lingered in the cold air. Around the camp, people began to work, not with shouts or frantic movement, but with steady, practiced hands. The hunters checked the horses, feeling along legs for strain, checking hooves for chips, scraping away the mud and frost. Leather cinches, loosened overnight, were tightened again. Saddles and packs were tested. Some horses, still tired from yesterday's exertion, stood quietly, steam rising from their breath into the morning mist. The women were stirring small coals into flame again, adding slivers of dry wood, feeding the fire until it burned strong enough to cook. The last of the liver meats, saved from the cold night, were roasted briefly and eaten quickly. No feasting, just fuel. Hunger was not ignored, but it did not dominate. It was simply tended to like the horses, the tools, the cold, loading the horses and shaping the caravan. The horses were brought into the center of the camp circle one by one. They were fed small amounts of dried grass or roots, then fitted with the burden they would carry. Some horses carried only meat, bundles wrapped in hide, tied securely. Others bore the heavy skins folded and stacked. A few, the strongest animals with the calmest temperaments, carried poles and wooden frames, for these would be used when the people walked again across the plains, or to build the travois for sleds and shelters. The dogs too were prepared. Some of them, large and strong, were fitted with small harnesses to pull travois. They did not complain. They moved quietly as the hunters secured the ropes. The camp no longer looked like a resting place. It looked like motion. The last check before travel, by now the sun had risen higher, though still pale and cold. The sky was clear. Small clouds of frost crunched beneath every footstep. People walked the grounds one last time, scanning the earth. No tools should be left behind, no scrap of meat wasted, no fire left smouldering. The only remains were the patches of bare earth, flattened grass, and the offerings of blood and sage. The horses shifted, restless, sensing movement. Ravens had gathered farther away, waiting for the camp to depart. Then the camp began to move, not all at once, but in a slow unfurling. First the hunters on their horses, then those who led the pack animals, then the women and children walking beside the travois and the loaded animals. Everyone moved in the same direction, toward the distant hills, toward home. The land behind them was silent again. Only the wind moved across it. But they did not leave it empty. They left it fed. They left it honored. And the journey home began, quiet, steady, beneath a pale sky, hooves and feet pressing into the frost-softened earth, carrying the weight of life given and life sustained. In the deep hush of the forest of pine forests and ancient cedar, the heart of creation begins not with noise, but with silence. Among shadowed trees and moss-draped stones, far from the bustle of village hearths, there the true shaping of tools, bows, canoes, and ritual items takes place. It is not a work of hands alone, but of breath, memory, and reverence, but never of spoken words. The forest itself becomes the only witness. It begins in the hush before dawn. Mist clings to the clearing like a veil, settled lightly over sleeping earth. No birds have begun their morning calls yet. The air is cool and sweet, carrying the faint scent of cedar resin and damp moss. In this early silence, one can almost feel the heartbeat of the ancient trees, slow, steady, older than any village or tribe. These quiet hours are when the makers of the forest rise, not to speak, not to gather, but to listen. For nothing can be carved or shaped without first understanding the spirit of the material. Cedar groves rise like living cathedrals. Their trunks are tall and smooth, silvered by age and fog. Low boughs drip with pearls of dew. Beneath their sweeping branches, the soil is soft, cushioned by centuries of fallen needles, dark and fragrant. From these trees, canoes are born, but no tree is taken without watching its growth across many seasons. Some have stood for generations, feeding birds, sheltering deer, drinking rain from countless storms. A maker does not simply choose wood. The forest chooses whether it is ready to give. Farther in the woods, old stone beds lie scattered. Basalt, flint, obsidian, granite, cold and unmoving beneath the canopy. It is here that blades are found. Some are lifted from the ground, broken by frost or river water. Some are pried from moss-covered ledges high above rushing streams. These stones once slept in mountains, carved by ice and rain, slowly awakened by time. When brought to the maker's hands, they do not simply become tools, they become an extension of the forest itself. The work areas are simple: a hollow beneath a cedar overhang, a spread of deerskin laid on the earth, a small fire, barely more than embers, so its smoke rises thin and does not disturb the air. Here, the sound of creation begins softly, the scrape of stone against wood, steady and slow, the tap of antler against flint, chipping away slivers one by one, a deep breath pulled between each movement, not to speak, but to steady the rhythm. There is no rush, for every rushed motion harms the spirit of the piece. Boughs are born this way, from yew, ash, or hickory branches, selected not by convenience, but by the way they have grown, straight, patient, without scars. The bark is peeled back carefully, layer by layer, sap beads at the edge, glistening like tears in the morning light. The maker follows the natural curve of the wood, never forcing it to bend where it does not want to bend. Hours, days, moons may pass as the bough takes form. Sinew from the deer becomes the string, soaked, stretched, dried in the smoke of slow-burning sage. Nothing is wasted, nothing is taken without reason. Canoes rise from cedar trunks. The first steps are quiet, soft cuts, shallow marks around the tree to take only what is needed. When the tree falls, it does not crash, it sighs into the moss. The hollowing begins with fire. Coals are placed on the trunk, tended patiently until the wood beneath softens and chars. No words are spoken, only embers moved, smoke brushed aside. The charred wood is scraped away with stone adzes. Steam rises into the forest air as water is poured inside, helping the wood expand, open, breathe. Bit by bit, the canoe becomes less tree and more river. Stone tools are shaped in places where the river runs clear and cold. Flint and obsidian pieces are struck with deer antlers, sharp taps along the edges, each one sending tiny chips snapping away. The sound is like distant raindrops on frozen ground. The maker turns the stone over and over, watching how light dances across its dark surface. When the edge is thin and sharp, it is bound to a wooden handle using sinew and tree resin. The result is more than a blade. It is a memory of water, bone, resin, and time. In the deepest part of the forest, where the canopy blocks nearly all light, special things are made, things not for hunting or travel, but for spirit. Feathers, antler tips, carved figurines, wooden masks, bundles of herbs, shells collected from distant riverbeds. Here the work slows even more. Each cut is a breath. Each bead of paint is a drop of dawn light mixed with charcoal or ochre. These are not meant to be seen by many. They are for ceremonies older than language. Sometimes rain begins to fall. It patters gently on the leaves, falls in silver threads through narrow beams of light. The makers do not stop. The soft hiss of rain becomes part of the rhythm. Tools are lifted beneath hides or cedar bark until the shower passes. The fire sputters but does not go out. Steam rises from the fresh-cut wood. The forest smells of smoke, rain, and the sweet tang of sap. By afternoon, the forest begins to wake. Birds call from high in the canopy. Chipmunks scurry across roots. In the distance, one may hear the faint crack of a branch as a deer walks past. The makers continue, though the light changes. Golden, dappled through the leaves, patterns of sunlight shift slowly across their hands. More shavings gather. More stone dust settles upon the ground. There is no measure of time except the angle of the light and the sound of the forest. Evening comes softly. The fire deepens into orange coals. Mist returns to cling between the trees. Finished bows are hung to rest. Canoes lie by the riverbed, filled with water to cure their shape. Blades are placed on smooth stones to cool. Not a single tool is left on bare earth. Everything returns to leather, bark, or woven reeds. The forest grows quiet once more, only the river speaking quietly to itself in the dark. Night encloses the work. Stars appear through gaps in the tall cedar roofs. The air grows cold. The breath of the forest slows again, deep and old. No boasting, no applause, no noise. Only the silent knowledge that something sacred has happened. That from the bones of trees, the ribs of mountains, and the patience of silence, new life has been shaped. And when dawn comes again, they will return, not to speak, but to continue. For the forest never stops creating. It only waits for those who know how to listen. Beyond the hidden villages, where smoke thins into mist and cedar roofs blend with the forest shadows, lie the ancient hunting grounds. They are not marked by stones or carvings, but by the memory of footsteps, light impressions in moss, faint paths along riverbeds, and the stillness of places where breath is held and the world seems to listen. The hunters leave before dawn, not as a procession, but as silhouettes fading into the greyness of morning. Their steps follow the riverbanks first, where stones are slick with dew and water moves like flowing silver. Cedar branches arch overhead. The forest remains hushed, as though it understands the purpose of their passing. Soon, the path narrows and the trail splits. One way into fern-covered gullies where elk move like shadows, another toward the rocky ridges known to mountain goats and eagles. Their tools are simple yet sacred. Bows shaped in seasons of patience, arrows tipped with obsidian, fletched with eagle or hawk feathers. Leather quivers rest against their backs. The last scent of smoke from the village fire follows them only a short distance before fading into the cold air. The forest here feels older. Roots twist through the soil like veins of the earth. Fallen trees, softened by moss and fungi, lie in silence as the hunters pass over them. Tracks are read not by words but by touch. The bend of a blade of grass, the imprint in wet mud, the scatter of disturbed leaves. Each sign is a fragment of a story written by hoof or paw. Near streams, the air grows colder. Mist rises from the water's surface and clings to the edges of ferns and stones. In these places, deer pause to drink, ears shifting at the slightest tremor of air. The hunters wait among the shadows of alder and cedar, their breath slow, their form still. Time stretches. The forest breathes around them. Farther north, where foothills lift into the bones of mountains, the terrain grows steep and stony. Pine and fir crowd the slopes. Here roam the larger spirits of the land, elk, bear, wolf, creatures whose presence is felt long before they are seen. The hunters tread carefully, measuring each step, placing weight on stone, not twig. The silence is deeper, broken only by distant ravens or the rustle of wind through high branches. When a life is taken, it is done with precision, swift without cruelty. The body is approached with reverence. Hands work quietly, guided by teachings older than memory. Nothing is wasted. Meat is wrapped in hide. Sinew is taken for bowstrings, bones for tools, hide for clothing, antlers for handles and carvings. Blood is washed from stone into flowing water, where it disappears into the river's ancient path. By late day, the hunters turn homeward. The sky softens to amber, then silver. The weight they carry is not burden but offering, food for their people, tools for future hands, proof that the forest still provides. Trails once empty now bear the scent of pine, hide, and distant fire. As the first stars emerge, the village appears like a memory between cedar trunks. Smoke rising in slender threads, canoes resting along the river's edge. The hunters return as they left, without disturbance, without announcement, merging once more into the rhythm of life held within moss, water, and wood. Night settles again over the land. In the darkness, the forest closes its eyes, and the hidden villages sleep beneath the watch of ancient trees. The trails of the hunters fade back into silence, waiting for dawn to call them forth once more. And as night falls once again, stars pierce the black canopy above, their light reaching through the highest branches. Fires settle into embers, canoes rest along riverbanks. Moss and leaves absorb the quiet, holding it like a secret. The villagers sleep, cradled within the embrace of trees that have stood longer than any voice, longer than any song. Life is still, sacred, and entirely entwined with the forest that shelters it. As the moon rises over the hidden villages, the forest exhales a breath older than memory. Shadows stretch long and thin, drifting across cedar roofs and moss-covered paths. The air is cool and dense with the scent of damp earth and resin. Night deepens, yet life continues in rhythms unseen, an intricate dance of shadow and light, spirit and matter, the living and the remembered. In the deepest clearings, where sunlight barely reaches, sacred spaces lie hidden beneath boughs of cedar and fir. Here the forest floor is soft and dark, covered with needles, leaves, and carefully arranged stones. Small hollows are carved into the earth or set with bowls of river water. Feathers from eagles, herons, and owls rest gently among moss and bark. Shells, collected from rivers many leagues away, glint faintly in the silver of moonlight. Herbs, roots, and dried flowers are bundled with thin strips of bark, bound in the patience of slow fingers. Each object holds a memory, a blessing, a story older than the village itself. The work of the spirit mirrors the work of creation. Just as bows are shaped to bend with the flow of the wood and canoes hollowed to glide with the river, these sacred arrangements are formed with patience and reverence. Stones are smoothed by water or gently chipped with antler to create small figurines. Masks are carved from cedar and painted in muted pigments of ochre, charcoal, and clay, each line marking an animal, a spirit, a moment in time. Nothing is hurried, nothing is wasted. Every gesture acknowledges that the forest watches, that the river listens, that the wind remembers. Occasionally, the forest itself participates in these rituals. Rain may fall softly, hissing against leaves and pooling at the edges of sacred hollows. A gust of wind will scatter feathers just so, or sway a branch in precise rhythm. Animals pause in their movements, as though aware that something beyond sight and sound is unfolding. The forest, patient and eternal, responds with subtle signals: the creak of wood, the shimmer of water, the faint rustle of moss. Rituals are not meant for display, nor do they demand applause. They are gestures of acknowledgement and remembrance. They honor the spirits of animals, the ancestors who once walked these same trails, the rivers that carry life, and the trees that breathe with the rhythm of centuries. Small fires, carefully tended, send thin trails of smoke into the canopy, their scent mingling with cedar, damp earth, and crushed herbs. Each ember is observed, each wisp of smoke traced with attentive eyes. Movements are deliberate, guided by breath and intuition, not words. Songs too exist here, but they are not songs for strangers. They rise in quiet waves, carried in the mind, in the rhythm of breathing, in the tapping of a carved drum or the soft brush of hands across stone. They mark the passage of time, the coming and going of seasons, the return of animals, and the flow of water. The sound is not loud, it is internal, vibrating in bones, leaves, and air. It merges with the forest, becoming indistinguishable from the rustle of ferns or the trickle of streams. At the edge of these sacred spaces, villagers move silently. Elders, hands marked with years of shaping wood and weaving bark, adjust arrangements of feathers or shells. Young ones follow, watching and learning without words. Each action is absorbed into memory, forming a chain that links generations to one another and to the land. Even sleep carries purpose here. Bodies rest on soft mats of woven cedar and moss, while spirits, free in the night, traverse rivers, trees, and stars. Through seasons, this sacred rhythm continues. Spring's first thaw brings renewal. Herbs sprout, animals return, rivers swell. Summer offers abundance, berries, fish, sunlight pouring into the forest's green cathedral. Autumn is a season of harvest, preparation, and gratitude, while winter enforces quiet reflection, holding both village and forest in frozen stillness. Each season is a cycle of offering and receiving, of shaping and yielding, of life flowing in harmony with the ancient pulse of the land. And yet, the forest remains ever watchful. Every tool, every canoe, every carved mask and polished stone carries the memory of hands that shaped it. Every river, tree, and stone is acknowledged and returned to. The villages, carefully hidden, exist in symbiosis with this eternal system, unseen by the untrained eye, unheard by the casual traveller, yet alive with the heartbeat of centuries. Night after night the stars emerge, piercing the canopy with silver light. Mist curls along river banks, softening the edges of stone and wood. The village sleeps, yet life does not cease. Canoes rest along quiet shores, tools cool beside smouldering fires. Sacred arrangements are left untouched, preserved until the next movement of breath and hand. The forest itself holds each memory, each gesture, each pulse of life, knowing that the people who live within it are part of its ongoing creation. Here, in this hidden world of cedar and river, of shadow and spirit, the line between forest and human, tool and memory, creation and ritual, blurs. Every action is both work and prayer, every breath a continuation of centuries-long rhythms. Life is measured not in hours, but in attention, reverence, and the silent acknowledgement that all things, trees, rivers, animals, and people, are woven into one endless, living story. Canoes glide across rivers that shimmer with the reflection of towering cedars. Water laps softly against their hulls, carrying the scent of rain and earth. Fish move beneath the surface, their scales catching fleeting light. Hunters wait without movement, their presence folded seamlessly into the flow of water and wind. Time is measured by rhythm, the rise of the sun, the slow drift of clouds, the shift of air over the river. Life proceeds without haste, yet nothing is left unattended. Back in the village, hands work tirelessly at sacred tasks. Feathers, shells, carved bones, and bundles of herbs are arranged and cared for. Each object, no matter how small, carries intention and memory. Moss is brushed from stones, wood polished with soft leather, and smoke from fires directed toward the canopy in careful spirals. Even in these quiet acts, the forest participates. The wind moves just enough to scatter petals or lift a wisp of smoke, and the trees seem to lean closer, listening. The seasons continue their slow procession. Spring brings the first stirrings of life. Buds unfold on alder and maple. Deer return to familiar clearings. Rivers swell with thaw. Summer flows in golden light, warming cedar bark and moss, and carrying the richness of berries, roots, and fish. Autumn cloaks the forest in deep amber, red, and ochre, preparing both land and people for the quiet reflection of winter. Snow falls gently, muffling sound, pressing life into a slow, deliberate rhythm of rest and renewal. Each cycle repeats, yet nothing is exactly the same. Change is embraced as part of the ongoing story. Even in moments of stillness, the forest is alive. The soft sigh of wind through needles, the distant call of an owl, the ripple of water along riverbanks. These are not interruptions, but integral threads in the fabric of life. The forest people recognize this, moving as part of the pattern, their work both guided by and guiding the land. Canoes, tools, sacred items, and dwellings, all are expressions of this enduring relationship, created with care and returned with respect. Night falls again. Stars pierce the darkness above, silver points reflected in rivers and lakes. The village rests, silent beneath the towering cedars. Fires settle into glowing coals, embers breathing warmth into the cold air. Canoes lie pulled to shore, tools await mourning hands, and sacred objects rest undisturbed in their hidden places. The forest watches, remembering the day's work, the footsteps of hunters, the touch of hands on wood, stone, and river water. Life in these hidden villages is unbroken, continuous, and intimate. Every day, every season, every action is a thread in a tapestry woven of patience, respect, and attentiveness. The forest people exist in a constant dialogue with the land, never speaking aloud, yet communicating through gesture, ritual, and careful observation. They are shaped by the forest, and in turn they shape it. Tools, canoes, homes, and sacred spaces, extending the life of trees, rivers, stones, and spirits into human form. And when the first light returns, spilling silver over mist and moss, the cycle begins anew. Hands rise, canoes are lifted, stones are shaped, fires are tended. The rhythm is steady, quiet, eternal. The forest remembers, the river remembers, the people remember, and all things move together in a single, patient flow. A life carved from silence, shaped by reverence, and carried across generations like a slow, unwavering breath of the forest itself. Before dawn, the forest holds its breath. Mist drifts between cedar and pine, soft and grey, settling on moss, leaves, and stones. The river moves quietly, carrying reflections of the sky in its slow current. The village remains still, its lodges dark and unassuming, blending seamlessly with the surrounding trees. Yet life is already stirring. Hands rise first to the rhythm of breath and memory. Fire embers are brushed, coals fed, and smoke directed through small openings in the roofs. Canoes are checked along the riverbanks, their hulls glistening with dew. Tools sharpened and rested overnight are inspected, arranged carefully upon hides or smooth stones. Every item carries intention, each shaped by hands, guided not only by need, but by reverence for the materials and the forest that provides them. As morning light filters through branches, the village comes to life in silent motion. Hunters move toward rivers and streams, their feet light on moss and fallen needles. Canoes glide across water, paddles dipping without sound. The air is filled with the scent of cedar, wet earth, and the first warmth of the sun. Birds begin to call in high branches, insects hum softly, and the forest awakens, responding in quiet acknowledgement to every careful step. In the heart of the village, work continues. Elders bend over cedar and yew, shaping bows, polishing stone tools, and weaving baskets of bark and roots. Children follow, observing and learning without interruption, absorbing the rhythm of labour. Hands are steady, movements deliberate. Nothing is rushed. Each cut of wood, each scraping of stone, each braid of fibre is performed with the patience of generations, a conversation with the forest expressed in motion rather than words. Ritual interweaves with daily life. Sacred spaces, small clearings beneath ancient cedars, hollows lined with stones, feathers, shells, and bundles of herbs, are tended with the same care given to tools and food. Smoke from small fires curls upward, carrying the fragrance of cedar, sage, and damp earth. Stones and carved figurines are adjusted, their positions shifted slightly to honour the spirits of the forest, the rivers, and the ancestors. Every gesture is a connection, a thread linking present to past, human to land, moment to eternity. By mid-morning, food gathering begins. Fish are taken from rivers with quiet precision, nets lifted gently to preserve the balance of water and current. Roots, berries, and herbs are collected carefully, leaving enough for the forest to recover. Every harvest is accompanied by acknowledgement, an offering, a placement of stones, a scatter of seeds, returning life to the earth that provides it. Canoes carry the bounty back to shore. The smell of fresh water, wet bark, and smoked fish fills the air. Afternoon brings tasks of repair and preparation. Canoes are dried and stored, bows and arrows rechecked, lodges maintained, tools are sharpened, hides stretched and cured, woven mats repaired. Movement continues in steady, unbroken rhythm. The sun filters through the canopy in shifting patterns, illuminating hands and faces, highlighting the textures of bark, stone, and woven fibres. Every action, no matter how small, is integrated into the greater whole, a seamless balance of necessity, skill, and reverence. As dusk falls, the village shifts again. Fires are lit in central hearths, thin smoke rising toward the darkening sky. Canoes rest along the riverbank. Tools are returned to their resting places. Sacred spaces are observed once more, offerings adjusted, arrangements attended to with care. Shadows deepen, folding over lodges, river and forest alike. The wind whispers through cedar and pine, carrying the scent of smoke, sap, and earth. Night deepens into quiet. Stars appear between the branches of towering cedars, mirrored in river and lake alike. The village grows still, yet life continues in subtle movements. The breath of animals, the rustle of leaves, the slow pulse of water over stones. Canoes remain at the shore, tools cool on hides, sacred objects undisturbed. The forest holds every action within its memory, preserving the rhythm of the day for the next cycle of light and shadow. In this hidden village, a single day is not simply a span of hours. It is a continuum of creation, labor, and connection. Work flows into ritual, ritual flows into rest, and rest flows into preparation for another day. The forest, river, and sky are never separate from the life of the people. All is intertwined. Tool, canoe, lodge, fire, breath, and step, moving together in a single quiet rhythm that endures across generations. The forest moves in cycles that extend far beyond the perception of human eyes. Yet the hidden villages exist in perfect harmony with this rhythm. Each season brings subtle shifts, shaping work, movement, and ritual in ways that are understood intuitively. Spring arrives first with soft green light, dripping from cedar tips and fern fronds. The air carries the scent of thawed earth, wet moss, and fresh water from swollen rivers. Life awakens gradually in a chorus of whispers, the rush of salmon in shallow streams, the faint rustle of buds opening, the distant tapping of a woodpecker against old trees. Villagers respond not with haste, but with measured movement. Canoes are lifted and examined, fire embers tended and tools prepared. Bows are checked for cracks that may have formed over winter. Nets are repaired with care, woven with the understanding that they will serve both people and river life. Every action is deliberate, reflecting awareness that the forest is alive, attentive, and patient. Summer stretches long, golden, and quiet. Sunlight filters through thick foliage, casting dappled patterns on the moss-covered floor. The river glimmers like liquid silver, carrying canoe after canoe as they glide along its current. Fish are abundant. Berries and herbs ripen along the riverbanks. Work and ritual intertwine seamlessly. While food is gathered, sacred spaces are tended. Small fires burn in hidden clearings, carrying smoke into the canopy, their aroma merging with cedar and wet stone. Feathers, shells, and carved stones are arranged meticulously, each placement part of an ongoing conversation with the forest, the river, and the ancestors. Autumn follows with quiet authority, deepening shadows and painting the canopy in amber, red, and ochre. The forest floor thickens with fallen leaves, softening footsteps. Villagers prepare for the months of stillness to come. Food is stored, fish smoked, meat dried, roots and berries gathered. Canoes are lifted high along riverbanks. Tools are maintained and repaired. Sacred objects are refreshed. Every gesture acknowledges the forest's generosity and expresses gratitude. The wind carries the scent of pine, damp earth, and smoke, wrapping the village in a living, breathing rhythm. Winter descends as stillness, blanketing the forest and village in snow and frost. The air grows crisp and quiet, sound muted by layers of ice. Rivers slow, often frozen at the edges, their currents hidden beneath a mirror of silver and white. Canoes rest, tools lie dormant, and sacred spaces remain untouched. Villagers move deliberately, conserving energy and respecting the forest's season of pause. Fires are tended constantly, sending gentle warmth and fragrant smoke into the cold air. Even in the harshest cold, life continues, quiet, measured, deeply attentive. The forest and village are inseparable, each supporting the other through the season of reflection. Through all these seasons, the forest people embody continuity. Hunting, crafting, and ritual are not separate acts. They are interwoven into an endless cycle of attention, respect, and balance. A bough is not only a tool, but a continuation of the cedar from which it was shaped. A canoe is not only a vessel, but a conversation with the river's currents. Each stone, feather, and shell carries the memory of its origin, its passage through hands shaped by countless generations. Life in the village is measured not in hours or days, but in the seamless flow of these cycles. Work, ritual, harvest, rest, and return. Night returns, folding the forest and village into quiet once more. Stars pierce the canopy, reflected in rivers, lakes, and pools of melted snow. Fires settle into embers, giving off faint warmth and smoke. Canoes rest along shores. Tools lie on hides or polished stones. Sacred objects are preserved in their hidden clearings. The forest listens. It remembers. It cradles the people who move through it, silently acknowledging the unbroken rhythm of life, work, and reverence that sustains the hidden villages across the endless passage of seasons. And with the return of dawn, the cycle begins again. Hands lifted, canoes gliding, tools in motion, sacred spaces attended. The forest, river, and village continue together, patient, enduring, and alive, an eternal conversation of life flowing in quiet, reverent harmony. Winter descends quietly over the hidden villages, blanketing the forest in soft white. Snow presses upon cedar branches and pine needles, muffling every sound. Rivers slow at the edges, their currents hidden beneath ice and mist. The forest rests, yet life continues in subtle, measured ways. Footsteps are careful, fires are tended constantly, and smoke rises thinly into the cold, grey sky. The air is crisp, carrying the faint scent of cedar, earth, and drying wood. Within the lodges, the rhythm of life adapts to the season. Canoes rest along frozen riverbanks. Tools lie on hides, polished and sharpened, waiting for spring. Food stored through autumn sustains the village. Smoked fish, dried meat, roasted roots, and preserved berries. Every ration is carefully measured, ensuring abundance without waste. Work slows, becomes deliberate and reflective. Hands repair what will be needed for the coming season. Hides are softened, baskets woven, and bows checked for cracks. Winter is also a time of memory and teaching. Elders move among younger hands with quiet attentiveness. Skills accumulated over decades, carving, weaving, stone shaping, the preparation of sacred objects are passed along without haste. The children observe, absorb, and imitate in silence. Each motion is a lesson: how to bend cedar without breaking it, how to read the river's subtle changes, how to prepare hides so they last through the harshest cold. Knowledge is conveyed not through words, but through the rhythm of movement, repetition, and the patient guidance of experience. Sacred practices continue, though quietly. Small fires burn in hidden clearings beneath tall cedars. Feathers, shells, carved bones, and bundles of herbs are arranged with deliberate care. Smoke rises in gentle spirals, carrying the essence of cedar, sage, and earth into the still night. Even in the harshest cold, offerings are tended, objects touched with the reverence of centuries. The forest receives these gestures, responds with a subtle rustle of wind through needles, a shift in the snow, a ripple across frozen pools. Every action is a dialogue spoken in breath, movement, and attention. Outside, the forest shifts imperceptibly. Tracks of deer, fox, and rabbit trace the snow. The river murmurs beneath its frozen surface. Ice forms intricate patterns along stone and root. The wind whispers through branches, carrying the memory of seasons past and the promise of spring to come. Villagers follow these cues with careful attention, measuring, observing, and learning the forest's secret rhythms. Every subtle change is noted. The first thaw along a creek, the scent of early buds beneath the snow, the arrival of migratory birds. Winter is not merely a time of survival. It is a time of preparation, reflection, and integration. The work of past months is consolidated. The knowledge of elders is absorbed. The spirit of the forest is observed in its slow, quiet transformations. Each gesture, each motion is both practical and sacred. Life is measured in cycles, not hours. The forest, the rivers, the animals, and the people exist in a web of interdependence, each informing and sustaining the other. And when the first signs of spring emerge, the thawing river, the buds pushing through frost, the faint hum of returning insects, the village is ready. Canoes will be lifted, tools readied, sacred objects tended, and work resumed with the quiet precision learned over lifetimes. Lessons absorbed during winter guide hands and eyes. The rhythm of life continues, unbroken, seamless, and patient, flowing with the enduring breath of the forest. Night falls over the snow-laden forest. Stars pierce the darkness, reflected in frozen pools and icy riverbanks. Fires glow warmly in lodges, sending up thin trails of smoke. The forest listens, it remembers, and in the hidden villages, life endures, silent, patient, and eternal, ready to awaken once again with the return of the sun. Spring arrives slowly, almost imperceptibly, over the hidden villages. Snow begins to melt in patches beneath cedar and pine. Ice along river edges fractures into thin sheets, drifting silently downstream. The air carries the sharp, clean scent of thawing earth, mingling with cedar resin, wet moss, and the faint sweetness of early blossoms. Mist rises from the rivers in pale tendrils, curling over stones and roots, softening the shapes of the forest into a gentle haze. The villagers respond to these changes with quiet attentiveness. Canoes are lifted from riverbanks, checked for cracks, and readied for journeys along water now freed from ice. Tools sharpened and polished during winter are returned to active use. Bows are strung, nets mended, and woven baskets prepared for gathering. Every motion is deliberate, measured against the pulse of the forest and the rhythm of the rivers. Nothing is forced. The forest, patient and wise, guides the hands that work within it. Animals emerge once more into open clearings. Deer step carefully onto softening moss. Elk graze along hidden meadows, their breath misting in the cool morning air. Birds return to nests, calling softly among branches. Hunters follow their signs with respect and patience. Tracks in the damp earth are read carefully. The bend of a hoof, the displacement of fallen needles, the glint of sunlight on a disturbed stone. Life is taken only when necessary, each action accompanied by the silent acknowledgement of the forest, the rivers, and the creatures themselves. Ritual continues alongside survival. Sacred spaces beneath the towering cedars are refreshed. Feathers, shells, carved stones, and bundles of herbs are rearranged with meticulous care. Fires burn gently, their smoke curling through the branches, carrying the scent of cedar and sage. Each offering is an acknowledgement of the cycles of life, an expression of gratitude for the abundance of rivers, the strength of animals, and the enduring presence of ancestors. Every movement, no matter how small, honors the intimate balance between people and land. The forest pulses with renewed life. Buds push through the thawed soil, delicate and pale green. Streams trickle with clarity, carrying the memory of winter snow. Insects emerge, their hum soft and steady, blending with the rustle of new leaves. The villagers move within this living rhythm, gathering, shaping, observing, and tending. Canoes glide across rivers, nets dip into pools of returning fish, and hands harvest roots and herbs. Work and ritual are inseparable, interwoven with patience, reverence, and understanding that all life is interconnected. Daylight lengthens, stretching shadows and illuminating cedar roofs and moss-covered paths. Children follow elders quietly, learning the patterns of river, forest, and sky. Each gesture is absorbed, how to read the water, to bend the cedar without breaking it, to observe the tracks of animals. Knowledge flows silently, embedded in motion, breath, and touch. Generations are linked not by spoken instruction, but by the rhythm of practice, repetition, and attention. Evening arrives with soft amber light. Canoes rest along riverbanks. Tools are returned to hides or polished stones. Sacred arrangements are observed one last time before nightfall. Fires deepen into glowing coals. Mist rises once more, clinging to the forest floor and river edges. The wind whispers through cedars, carrying the scent of earth, sap, and smoke. The forest listens, remembering each action, each gesture, each careful breath. Night encloses the hidden villages once more. Stars pierce the canopy, mirrored in the gentle flow of rivers. Canoes rest, tools cool. Sacred spaces remain untouched. The forest, the rivers, and the people are entwined in a seamless continuum, each movement of life flowing naturally into the next. Spring, fragile and new, signals the renewal of cycles, the continuation of survival, and the quiet endurance of centuries of living in harmony with the land. And with the return of dawn, life stirs again. Canoes glide, tools are lifted, sacred spaces attended. The forest exhales, the rivers murmur, animals move, and the hidden village breathes in rhythm with the eternal cycles of creation, life, and renewal. The forest endures, vast and patient, holding centuries in its roots and branches. Rivers continue to wind through valleys and meadows, carrying memories of snow, rain, and the passage of countless seasons. The hidden villages remain cradled within its embrace, silent, unassuming, yet alive with a rhythm as old as the land itself. Life within the villages flows in quiet cycles of creation, work, and ritual. Canoes glide over silver rivers, boughs bend with patience, and stone tools carry the memory of mountain, river, and forest. Sacred spaces beneath towering cedars hold feathers, shells, and carved objects, each a testament to reverence, attention, and the deep understanding of life's interconnectedness. Elders guide the young without words, passing down knowledge through movement, touch, and shared rhythm. Every action, harvesting, shaping, tending, observing, is both practical and sacred, a dialogue between human hands and the land that sustains them. Seasons turn in a seamless continuum. Spring brings renewal, rivers swelling with melted snow and buds emerging through soft moss. Summer pours sunlight across leaves, rivers, and fields, offering abundance to both people and forest. Autumn cloaks the canopy in gold, amber, and red, guiding preparation, storage, and reflection. Winter settles in silence, muffling sound beneath snow, slowing movement, and deepening contemplation. Through each change, life flows naturally, without interruption, without rush. The rhythm of the forest guides every gesture, every breath, every heartbeat. Animals, rivers, trees, stones, and stars are not separate from human life. They are part of the same pulse. Hunters move with respect, taking only what is necessary. Canoes carry provisions and sustenance without disturbing the currents. Sacred objects are tended, fires burn gently, and offerings are made to honor life, memory, and the unseen. Every step, every gesture, every breath is part of an unbroken dialogue, a living story written in motion and silence. Night falls and the stars appear, piercing the canopy and reflecting in calm rivers. Fires burn down to glowing coals. The forest exhales, cradling lodges, canoes, and sacred spaces alike. The hidden villages, though unseen by most, exist in perfect harmony with the land, sustaining an eternal rhythm of life. Work, ritual, survival, and reverence are inseparable, flowing together as naturally as rivers meet the sea. And in the quiet that follows, one truth remains. The forest and the people are inseparable, intertwined in a cycle of patience, respect, and continuity. Life here is neither hurried nor constrained. It moves at the pace of the trees, the rivers, and the wind. Every act of creation, every moment of observation, every breath of reverence is a continuation of what has always been and what will always endure. The hidden villages persist, alive with memory and motion, teaching through silence, guiding through example, sustaining generations in harmony with the eternal forest. And in this enduring rhythm, the forest, the rivers, the animals, and the people exist together, whole, unbroken, and timeless.